Work sucks less when we realize that unity does not require uniformity. A cohesive culture means everything at work, but it doesn't mean everyone needs to show up in the same way. In fact, it's way better when we don't. A shared mission? Yes. And the only way to achieve it is if you invite everyone to bring the stuff that makes them interesting to the table. Neil Ghosh has made it his mission to help make this approach a reality. He's written a book called Do More Good, and he's speaking to folks around the world about it. One idea I really love, in addition to rewarding performance at work, let's reward decency. You know, the people who do the right thing, are a delight to work with, who make things easier, own their mistakes, and support folks who are struggling. The core value under all of this, inclusion, giving more people more pathways to be seen and valued, and helping teams bring out the best in everyone. We do all that, we get more done, and those big hairy missions that usually just sit gathering dust on company websites become living, breathing invitations to make an actual difference in the world. Sounds pretty good to me.
That's easy.
Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. If you enjoy this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Neil. Okay, Neil Ghosh, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you here. Before we dive into all the good stuff that you're doing, I'd love to just give you a chance to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the work you do and how you came to be doing it.
Sure, TJ. First of all, again, I want to repeat, I like what you do because I think just before we started the conversation, I mentioned how important it is to have conversation. And I will touch on that in our dialogue today. Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of always say I have went through several transformation of my life. I worked in private sector for almost a part of my life. I spent time with the nonprofit part of my life, international development, government contracting. Had a top secret clearance from the Department of Homeland Security once upon a time. I worked in a so-called diplomacy for some time. So I have been around in many sectors.
Yeah,
I think that kind of gives me a pretty good understanding how different sectors operate, but more importantly, how can different sectors connect with each other, irrespective of their differences. I think that's what I feel that valuable in my life journey. Of course, my connection with you because of our role with Pro-Human.
Yeah.
And the book I published. These days, my fifth reinvention is more to do with I have a company that I have, in government contracting, but I do a lot of speaking tour these days, at many different settings, and trying to meet a lot of people. I'm going to this journey of listening tour. I just came back from Alabama, and I will talk more about the podcast, asking questions. What is one thing keeping up at night that we can solve at a local level? So some talking, but a lot of listening.
Yeah, probably the most, or one of the most important skills, listening in almost every situation. I'm sure across all your journeys, the folks who are able to listen are often the ones who are getting the most done.
It's a work in progress, but yes.
I agree with you. I'm right there with you. And I think it is for many of us. I'm curious, you've had this really interesting journey with the ways you've shown up at work. What role does work play in your life?
I think work plays a huge role. If you think about it, most of us spend almost 25% of our time, plus minus, in a given year at work. That's 2,000 hours. I'm talking average work hour. A lot of people in US and Japan and other countries spend a lot more than that. So think about from that perspective, right? What it means. And I think from that perspective, I think I started saying, and then I think I digressed. The fact that we are trying to make work more meaningful, more purposeful, more healthy, is what you try to do, and which I find fascinating, because if we spend so much time and doing something, I'd rather be happy, I'd rather be healthy, and I'd rather have a purpose. So I think, I mean, I have had the same opportunity in every job. I will say no.
Yeah.
But I think, but that's the goal. And I have, for full transparency, sometime I left a job because I was not getting what I was hoping to accomplish. Or I'm not recommending that for everybody, but I didn't, because I wanted something that keeps me there's a purpose involved. So
yeah. And I think, to your point, I mean, it's not always possible for everybody, but to the extent that you can at least put it on the list of possibilities to consider, and then you can decide, not right now, not in this field, whatever, but at least you feel like I've made a choice, right?
And if you don't mind, at some point in the conversation, remind me, because I want to touch on this. I didn't think about it, talking about it, but you brought me something in my memory that I think is worthwhile. And we don't have to talk it now, but I'll give you a hint what I'm trying to say. Many years ago, I used to speak about, because I was in nonprofit almost for 17 years, in many different capacities as CEO of large organization. I talk to a lot of young people, and they have this, in their mind, they felt they have to work in nonprofit to do good. And I completely rejected that idea. So remind me, because coming back to, I think there are many ways. It doesn't matter what work we do, absolutely doesn't matter. And we can talk about it, that you can put that context of purpose in anything we do. But
I agree.
I don't want to mention that to you.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, and we can come back to that as we start to dive into your book, because your book is all about doing more good. So I think that will be relevant. But my quick reaction is, I do a lot of coaching work, executive coaching, leadership coaching, and certainly, particularly folks who are on the younger side, they're feeling that. They're working in sort of quote unquote normal jobs and going, how do I find meaning and purpose and all of that in this space? And that takes some work. Yeah. Very interesting. I'm curious for you, especially since you've had all this experience in different sectors. What's the thing, the factor that shows up most to, this is the DesuckifyWork podcast. So what's the thing that makes work suck the most? Is there a consistent theme when you felt like work wasn't working for you?
If I can frame it, I thought about this conversation, and I kind of wanted to frame it. It's definitely work, but, I think most of us, and particularly I will say, I live most of my professional life in a capitalist society, so context is that, right? You have to kind of contextualize whatever we talk about. I think the question is, how do we reduce stress? Stress is a huge factor. It doesn't matter what organization you work for. I have seen IT. I've seen people working in old age home. I've seen people working in across a sector. So I would say, how do we reduce stress? That's, I think, number one. And number two, I would say, with the context of that, how do we improve quality of life? How do we improve it, irrespective of what maybe our day-to-day job may be? Third thing I say, how do we become an engaged citizen, both at the individual level? So that's a citizen, as a citizen of a country. What is my role in the community? But also, how do I become an engaged citizen as a business leader? So I think that will be my framing for this conversation, and hope that will add some value to your listeners if we wrap around that line of thinking.
Yeah, I appreciate that thinking. I mean, I definitely want to come back to the engaged citizen idea, because I think that's interesting, specifically as you bring that into the workplace. But I want to start with what you mentioned, which is stress, because I think that's always present at work, but it feels maybe more so now. I mean, there's this combination of the noise of the world, and then this introduction of a massive new technological shift around AI, and then just the way we work, maybe if you want to kind of contextualize that within the capitalist system. But what I see is all of that weighs on you, and then you show up at work, and either it doesn't have meaning, it doesn't have purpose, or you're stressing about stuff that isn't the stuff that I should be stressing about. It's these sort of pointless meetings or areas of work that feel like, why are we focusing there instead of there? We're not doing the important thing. What are you noticing around what's creating that stress?
I will come to that, but one thing you said, sometimes some of these things, when we talk about this, sound so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to mention that because you're a coach, and
Yeah.
I'm just telling your listener that as obvious as it may sound, we do it again and again and again. So I would just mention that as a point of conversation. Anyway, coming back to your question, I think you touched on it. I think we are living in a time I call the 3D: the division, the disruption, and digital overload.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fact, and it's not a political comment. It's just where we are, and I'm talking to a lot of people across the country, and I can vouch for this, what I just said.
Yeah.
So if you take that, the division, disruption, and digital overload, the question is that automatically increase stress.
Mm-hmm.
Without any doubt. It doesn't matter what kind of work environment you're in.
Yeah.
And what it does, I call it a trust crisis, right? Because these are all linked. Trust is linked to the three things I mentioned: the division, disruption, and digital overload.
Yeah.
By nature, anytime trust erodes, it's a fact. Anytime trust erodes, division goes up.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a way. I looked at society away from work. I also done community work across the world, in East Africa, West Africa, Latin America, Asia. So I've seen that at a community level, and it's a corporate level, no different. So that's number one.
Yeah.
So the question is, for me, trust is not a soft idea. It kind of gives us license to operate, if you think about it.
Yeah.
If you think about a business, trust gives us license to operate. So the question is, how do we reduce stress, which automatically, hopefully, increases. At a personal level, I'll come to that business in a moment. And it's easy for me to say, it's not easy to do, because it's the third item I said, digital overload. We are bombarded with news on a constant basis, whether we like the news, we don't like the news, but it's there, right? In some shape or form.
Yeah.
So I am making a conscious effort, and I am talking about it in my speaking and my meetings, in a small forum, large forum, that how do you reduce the noise? You mentioned that a little while ago, so I will kind of repeat what he said. I'm trying my best to focus on things I can control and other things I can't. And I can give you, with the podcast, outside the podcast, example that people came to me. They're well-established people in the corporate world and came to my talks and say, we are feeling very helpless. We are feeling very voiceless and all kind of less word.
Yeah.
So my immediate reaction was, of course, I cannot solve their problem, because this is not something I just don't know how to best answer, except the fact you have to focus on things you can control and try your best to other things, just not focus too much. I cannot say you cannot focus at all, but not focus so much. That's number two. The third thing I will say is connect with people. And I am making an attempt myself, which I am, I've been in industry where I had to talk a lot of people, but I'm making a deliberate attempt now to reconnect with people I haven't spoken for a long time. Because of phone and internet and the way we operate, we don't connect with human being. We write emails or other method of communication. So I'm deliberately trying to communicate and talk to people, agree or disagree. So I think those are the three things I would say at a personal level. On the leadership level, some of them are cliche, but I will say it anyway. I was talking to the CEO of UNHCR USA, Susan, a couple of days ago, and she talks a lot about servant leadership. I know many people talk about it. I think that what I will say is something I am encouraging people from a corporate perspective. So I talked about individual, now it's a corporate perspective. At a corporate level, how to reduce stress will be hold a listening session, no PowerPoint, just listening session, no PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I will say, addition to that, you can run a trust audit. So basically measure, we say a lot of things in our meetings, our vision statement, our mission statement, not to point fingers at anybody, but am I really doing it? Because if we kept saying these things,
Mm-hmm.
and employee notice we are not doing any of them or doing some of them,
Yeah.
I think it's okay to acknowledge we are not internally at least. So I think that also builds trust internally that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
for the heck of saying something, but I mean it, even if I fail,
Yeah.
even if I succeed. So I think I call it a trust audit,
Mm-hmm.
internal trust audit. I think that helps. We can talk more later, but I talk about drawing clear red lines in work, both in terms of inclusion, discrimination, ethical boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
By nature, business, we all know business sometimes have to do things that, there's always not a clear black and white. There's some gray lines there. So I think having that ethical boundaries, or I would call a red line, is again increasing trust within your employees. Not that you're doing everything right 100% of the time, but having those discussion, I think, helps. So I think those are my comment in terms of how to reduce stress and increase trust in an individual and corporate segment.
Yeah. They're all very interesting, and they certainly all connect to me. And I imagine many folks listening. I think, I just loved the way you said connect with people, because you didn't just say it like I did. You said connect with people. And you put an accent on people that immediately told me the way we most often connect with others is more through sort of their digital avatar, right? We are emailing, or we're connecting through messaging, and it creates a boundary for all of the things that allow human connection to provide all that it can provide. And I think some of us may work in remote settings, and I think at the very least, getting on a phone call can be helpful. Even sometimes without the screen can be like, okay, now I'm like actually connecting with you, as opposed to looking at you like it's on work. So I really just love that notion of like, we're basically approximating human connection most of the day, and there's value in sort of stepping into.
Particularly now, I don't have to tell you why. You know more than I do on this particular subject, but I think the reason I said I'm trying harder now, because it's much easier now not to connect. And that's the reason it's more of a deliberate attempt. Then I have to remind myself, no, I got to do this. And I host a lot of dinner, but that's a different conversation. Because I like to host, I like to meet people. But anyway, but you got my point, that it's a deliberate attempt. Before, it was happening naturally. So there was not a lot of, I didn't have to work on it. Now I have to work on it. That's what
now it's on your list of things you have to pay attention to. The thing you talked about in the workplace, around the stated goals, mission, vision, values of an organization, and how you show up within them. I think that's so critical, because I think I've seen stats that that's often the biggest breakdown of trust within companies. Is it's almost worse to have all that stuff on the wall, to share it during the town hall meeting, and then very obviously not live up to them. But I love your point about, well, of course we're not going to live up to them fully. We're human beings, but talk about that.
Right. I think that it breaks barrier. I have seen it, and I have guilty of both, not doing it and doing it, I suppose. So it's also learned from experience. That sometimes, I think I've seen how it eases up the environment, and people say, well, we can talk about it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing you mentioned that I loved was the idea of servant leadership. And what's interesting is this conversation is following one just a week ago for the podcast, where the whole focus was on servant leadership and ways to bring that into organizations in very practical ways. Because it's another one of those things where you could say, hey, we want to be servant leaders. But at the end of the day, like, well, what does that mean? What do you actually do to step into that role and invite others into that role? And that's where the challenge can often be, right? It's like, I am a servant leader, but
right. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I want to think about it if I'm one person, right? And maybe I'm not in the leadership of a company, and I'm feeling all of this. I'm feeling the breakdown in trust. I'm feeling the weight of the world. I'm feeling all this stuff. Is there any, what is the simplest thing I can do to feel a little bit better, a little bit less stressed? If you were kind of to think about all the things you're exploring here around trust and stress, what's that one thing that that a middle manager or a more junior person in the organization can do?
Right. I think, that leads automatically to my second point, which I thought about is I don't think there's a lack of ambition in our life. Most people, I'm sure there are some, we
Sure.
have to encourage our young people, hey, be motivated, have some ambition.
Mm-hmm.
But I sometimes feel there's a lack of alignment,
Mm-hmm.
not ambition. And where I structured my book somewhat deliberately, I hope that it's rests on three pillars: empathy, purpose, and action.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll come to that in a minute. Ambition sometimes talks only about the action
Mm-hmm.
or the result of the action, but sometimes loses the connection with the purpose and empathy. And I think when you ask me that direct question, my direct answer is that I think that helps, and I can elaborate on that. And the book also believes that the three belief system I tried very hard to wrap my hands around. And one of them is everyone, and that hopefully answered the question or the topic you just mentioned. How do I convince people? That's a different conversation. But I do believe that everyone has something to offer, can make a difference. Everyone.
Yeah.
I think now, how do we convey that? I'll come to that in a minute. But for me to repeat that we all have the power to make a difference, I think that's kind of my grounding on anything I say. And the second belief on the book I tried is we can learn from everyone. Everyone can teach us something. And the third one, which is connected with the book more, I suppose, that giving in any shape or form, it doesn't, I'm not talking monetary giving. We can discuss that in Engage Citizenship conversation, actually has proven increased quality of life and reduce loneliness. There are an institution like Harvard and others have done research on that, and there are many data. So it's not me saying that people can find data, the power of giving, which I always talk about. So kind of coming back to you, whenever I find myself, and I can give you example why I left. I had a decent job at that time. I was with government contracting, but I was in the spot, which you just mentioned a little while ago, that tsunami happened. First tsunami, the first one.
Yeah.
I was very much at a loss. And this is an exact example of what you talked about. I had no idea how do I connect with the tsunami to me. There's nothing I can do about it, except I took a month off and I started something called tsunamivictims.org. That's it. It was just me. With a friend of mine, created a website. I didn't take any money. The money went to the Red Cross. Money went to White House. But what that 1 month did to me, I found my purpose. Long time. And I decided to leave that position and started looking for a job. I joined the Dutch Netherlands Development Organization. But the reason of sharing this story, everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
But coming back to whenever we hit that moment of what you said, I think connecting the purpose, why am I doing this? I find it absolutely critical. It doesn't have to be nonprofit. Even if I make a microchip, even if I make a plate, even if whatever I do, if I can purpose, I think that's hugely beneficial.
Yeah, and I want to dig into that a little more. I know you touched on it earlier as well, because I think as folks are struggling with this idea of purpose, and so let's say they're sitting in their job now, they're feeling stressed, they're feeling some disconnection, and they're thinking, maybe, I want to really connect to my purpose, and therefore I need to go find a job in the nonprofit sector. And let's say they work in a company that makes microchips. How might they connect to and work in their purpose in a place like that? Because I think a lot of people might be like, I don't get it.
Yeah. I will do my best. I'm not saying I have a magic answer, but that's usually what I try.
Yeah.
I'll start with young people I used to meet. Just when I was CEO of SOS Children's Villages, USA, literally there will be young people coming in a busload. I mean, that's a trip they will make to meet with me.
Yeah.
And they'll be somewhat disappointed when I say, look, you don't have to work and go in nonprofit. when you're young, you have this idea, I'm going to change the world, I will do good. And I keep pushing back. I say, that's just not, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There are good people in nonprofit, there are good people in for-profit.
Yeah.
Believe me, there are a lot of whatever not so good people, I will put it politely, in for-profit and not so good people in nonprofit. So you'll be very disillusioned. Because I have been there for 17 years. I've seen both.
Yeah.
So I push back a lot on that notion of, good for nonprofit. So that's one. Second thing, so that's more on a macro basis.
Yeah.
On a more, coming back to some fundamental, the reason I said what purpose does, at a very basic level, it kind of helps us to understand why am I doing this? At a very, at a very, at a very basic level. Because why kind of helps us to get some, at least one level down of not just because of doing it, other than why am I doing it? At a deeper level, I think there's a desire to make a positive impact, the one you mentioned, whatever the way it can. I think that what purpose does, it kind of, this is what I believe, it changes the energy in terms of my belief system, what I'm doing. I think it improves resilience and deepen our relationship no matter what I'm doing. I'm not saying it's easy. I'll give an example of that. 2-3 months ago, I was talking to a lot of young people, college students. And they ask questions, no filter. They just ask whatever they want to ask. And sometimes you're not even ready for it. But this was a decent question. So he said that, why do I need a purpose? No, he put it more politely. Do I need a purpose to be successful? Sorry. Do I need a purpose to be successful? If I remember the question correctly.
Yeah.
So I said, and I don't have I don't have 100% correct answer. So I said, look, I'm not sure you need purpose to be successful. I'm sure a lot of people are successful. They don't have a purpose possible.
Right.
But I do believe there will be a time in your life when things will not go right. You may lose a job. You may not like what you're doing. Very few people can say curve is like this. Life is like this. That one I can assure you, when the curve is down, purpose will help you tremendously to latch on to hold on to have belief in whatever you are good at. So that was my answer. So I'm repeating what I said to the young person, to you again.
Yeah, no, I love that.
So that's, so that's all I can say.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're liking what you hear and like the idea of making work not suck, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. What role is work playing in your life right now? Let's talk about it. All right, back to the show. Yeah, I think there's a few things in there that strike me. One is, when that person asked that question and you answered, you could be successful without a purpose. My first thought was, yeah, but how are we defining success? Right.
That's another layer of conversation.
There's a thin sort of definition that says, hey, I'm making,
what is success?
I'm making lots of money and blah, blah, blah. Maybe for some folks that's enough. But I think for most of us, ultimately, success in life encapsulates lots of areas. And
absolutely.
And if we're not connecting to our purpose, some of those are going to be kind of left on the ground, right? And so that's what happens when you go into the trough of your normal sort of up and down pathway. Those troughs are actually those learning experiences that say, hey, you know what? We may need to rethink what success means to us so that when we come back up this time, we're bringing that purpose with us. And it's actually going to make that sense of success a little more meaningful. And it's going to be standing on a little bit firmer ground. It doesn't mean there's not going to be another trough, but now that trough's going to be a little more manageable. So I think you're uncovering something really beautiful there. And then I think there's
before we move on to something, whatever, I just want to mention, you talk about learning.
Yeah.
If this guy asks me this question again, I will add this because I did not at that particular moment. Sometimes your mind is not as clear. You go on to whatever it is. Like I now am connecting the dot clearly that I could have added a layer. What is success? So that at least he doesn't leave the conversation in his mind, which I don't know what he was thinking about success.
Yeah.
So I think I owe it to the young generation or any generation anyway. So that's one. One more thing I will say before we move the conversation out of purpose. because I do say this a lot, and people
Mm-hmm.
have come back to me saying they found that comment very useful, so I'm going to say it again.
Yeah.
That purpose doesn't shout or scream.
Mm-hmm.
It whispers. And you can look at Bible, you can look at many religious scripture, how they define this purpose conversation. I am not a religious scholar, but I intentionally say that because, at least for me, it happened, and I'm not going to go into my personal history, but my point is, I found purpose in the quiet moment
Mm-hmm.
and many times in life. So I just want to leave it at that, that you need to find your own quiet moment, whether you go for a walk, whether you go for a retreat, that's up to you. But all I'm trying to say, at least from my experience, the time I found purpose is usually a quiet time.
Yeah.
I found time so that I can reduce the noise, I can hear the purpose. I just want to mention that.
No, that's a really, I like the way you're describing it. And it brings me back to the notion of listening. But in this case, we're listening to ourselves and our emotions and what our body is telling us, right?
Listening to yourself.
Create space for that. And that's when things like purpose and deeper values emerge. Yeah, I love that. I want to come back to the book we've been touching on along the way. So I want to give you a chance just to kind of introduce the book, the title, which Do More Good. And how did you kind of come into it and maybe explore just a little bit like, how are you connecting to the idea of doing more good? Like, what was your framework for the book?
And I am very happy to say it has evolved, and I will explain what I mean by that. You start with something, you kind of end up somewhere else, but which is fine, always fine. I find it fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
The book came about, and I think everyone, I'm hoping, will appreciate what I'm about to say. Book came about. I never wrote a book. I write, of course. I have publication at Stanford Social Innovation Review. I write at many places.
Mm-hmm.
I have a column at Patheos, as I currently write on building bridges.
Mm.
The book came about for three things. One, I don't want to go into deeper because it takes a lot of time, is as a child, a very young boy, I have seen the power of small giving. I grew up in a family where, I kind of very openly say we didn't have a lot. My father was making, I would say, $120 per month in the 80s, late 80s. So we're not poor, but we are very careful. And I don't want to digress the conversation. My point I'm trying to make, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot, there was no unlimited empathy. And I saw the power of empathy, and that's become one of the pillars of my book.
Yeah.
It's no longer 2 + 2 4. It's 2 + 2 8 and 2 + 2 10. So I saw that at a very young age.
Yeah.
As I started traveling, I become older, and I've been to many countries, as I mentioned, not just in U.S. Town, but in East Africa, West Africa, Latin America, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. I've been to Morocco, and I've seen that it's no longer restricted to my own little neighborhood, but it's there everywhere. That reinforced my view that it's not something special about my neighborhood. It's there everywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's number two. And number three of the book was, a lot of people said to me, what can I do? And these are not necessarily wealthy people or people who are very successful. Everybody said that, what can I do? I think that kind of put this concept in my mind. I met a lot of interesting human beings. And instead of me learning from them, I hope I learned something from them. Can I share what I learned from them to others? So that's the book came about. And it's divided into three parts: sit, rise, and act. Each section had 8 to 9 chapters. Each chapters have a section on who are these people, what exactly they're about, what I have learned from them, what they have done for the world, and what everybody else can learn from them. And then that was very important to me. I did not want to write a book about motivation because there's plenty out there, out there. I didn't think I will add a lot of value just if I focus on that.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a toolbox. So this book is about an action. After every chapter, there's a section that are list of organizations that are vetted by Charity Navigator. It ranges from healthcare to environment to child trafficking, whatever things that bother us or we believe that we need to address this.
Yeah.
I have a list of organizations people can join, learn from, or donate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the book in a summary version. The reason I said that where I started, where I'm going, is kind of, I find it just amazing. What the book has done is, of course, anytime you write a book, you go and talk to people. It's just normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm doing now, I think I mentioned offline to you, I realize that the country right now is very divided, and it's affecting corporate world as much as affecting our personal life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I found a different voice in this journey. It was not planned. It was not something I thought about. And as
Yeah.
I'm speaking, and I think I mentioned as I just came back from Alabama, I
Mm-hmm.
spoke at the Birmingham Community Foundation. I spoke at one of the largest Rotary Club in the world, Birmingham Rotary Club.
Okay.
100 people, more than 100 people, and 350 people. I'm talking about unity does not require uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, I'm talking about the book, of course, as it comes. There are characters
Sure.
in the book that I bring it up to make some points.
Mm.
So I think I wanted to share this because if I didn't tell you this, the story will be unfinished. The book has its own value, and of course, which I talked about.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to say, okay, what do I do with this lesson? How does this lesson impact now the state of union we are in as a country? And I talk about empathy is not a blue state value or a red state value. It's an American value. So what does even that mean in a
Yeah.
corporate setting, an individual setting? So that's
Mm.
what I'm doing a lot more.
I really love that. I mean, the phrase unity does not require uniformity like jumps at you and it grabs you because I think for many it's felt like, well, yes, it does, or it has to, or that's what we feel like we need to do. And I think about this in the corporate setting, right? Because there's been a lot of corporations trying to connect to things like purpose and doing good in the world, particularly over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years as politics has played a bigger role. And oftentimes in an effort to sort of quote unquote do good in the workspace, it has felt like there's one voice here. There's one, it does need to be uniform. And the question that comes up to me is like, well, who kind of gets to decide what good is in this work setting? And so how do you, if I'm in a workplace and I'm trying to help us focus on doing more good, how do I invite and respect and allow for an array of voices and perspectives on what good means, and then create a space where that can actually, where all those voices can coexist?
I'll give you a macro and micro answer if I may.
Yeah.
I think I'm hoping that will be helpful. So
Yeah.
on a macro part, I recently wrote a piece, not recently, almost 8 months ago at CEO World. And I referred to a study by Zibdo, 2025 study by Zibdo,
Mm-hmm.
investor survey, where they said 78% of investors consider CSR when they invest in a company.
Mm.
That's a pretty large number. And I go
Yeah.
much deeper. What does even that mean?
Yeah.
I talked about elevating CSR to not just a nice to have, but integrate that in the business. There's a lot of things that I have done and I looked at in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I talked about prioritize employee well-being and inclusion. And there's enough data to talk about. I'm just telling the macro part of it before I touch on the micro part of it. I talked about invest in communities where you operate. So as you know, a particular large business, not necessarily they have factories in US and somewhere else. So I am a big into, I have seen it, how it works in many countries. You got to take care of your people locally. Some companies done amazing job and that becomes a company town, but others kind of don't. So I talk a lot about that. I talk about, so I think on a macro level.
Yeah.
On a micro level, I think I talk about these are anybody can do that. You don't need, and when I say, and I think I mentioned at the beginning, doing good is not necessarily giving money. It's just doing something, and we define it many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I call it micro altruism. Altruism. That's a word I use a lot. It can at an employee level, it can be thanking someone. It can be making sure you give credit to somebody who deserves credit. From a corporate standpoint, I think you can making space for people who are no longer as visible.
Mm-hmm.
And this is connected to kind of a servant leadership, by the way. I'm sure
Yeah.
you see the connection there from a leader perspective, right? That's an
Absolutely.
absolutely integral part of doing good. I talk about you always reward performance. I'm not taking it away, but I think see if you can reward decency along with performance.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible. I think it's
Yeah.
possible,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not something we think about that. It's not
Right.
our DNA doesn't talk
Mm-hmm.
about that. So I think
Yeah.
I kind of focus on that. I talk about shares. By nature, we always say he is my super salesman or super saleswoman or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
He has solved this biggest problem. But I think we don't do enough of people who are on the periphery of those success.
Mm.
At the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, I'm coming back to the same thing. That it's
Yeah.
not magic, it's inclusion. It's all
Yeah.
about inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Not inclusion, I'm not talking about just race or religion, but inclusion
Yeah.
of many factors of inclusion.
Yeah.
Those are the things I talk about. And I think that itself, and sure, you can always have a giving day. You can always encourage a micro giving. That's some company make a culture out of it that, we
Sure.
collect and we give to a charity and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
There are many, many ways, but I think that's what I meant by in a corporate setting of
Yeah.
do more good.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I like that a lot of what you're talking about isn't even really scratching the surface of anything political, right? It's more just how you
Absolutely.
show up, how you connect with people, how you can help really see the people that you're working with and bringing them in and bringing their talents and acknowledging them. I think you mentioned sort of the super performer. There are what I would call the folks on the periphery, but also just the folks who are the quiet folks who are just putting out those fires every day. They're not giant, but they're what allow the whole organization to run. There are those kinds of folks who don't necessarily get the visibility either. To the extent that there is political-ish stuff, I think my sense is the more you are valuing all of the voices, the more you're going to leave room for the different perspectives. Meaning, if we're talking about giving and somebody might want to give to a cause that is quote unquote more progressive, that there's room for somebody who wants to give to a cause that is quote unquote more conservative or more libertarian.
100%. I'm so glad you brought it up. And please don't lose your thought, because if we end the conversation without touching on it, we are leaving an elephant in the room, which will be not nice for your audience or any audience.
Yeah.
I wrote 2 pieces, I think, in Fast Company.
Mm-hmm.
8 to 9 months ago, specifically touching on this. So I don't want to go deeper into that, but I'm touching on exactly what you said.
Yeah.
That be clear, it's nothing wrong, because we, at the end of the day, we have a belief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite possible, not every time, a company leader may have a very strong belief in either way.
Yeah.
And that's part of life. For the leader, it is a responsibility to ensure, and I've done some study on this, younger people are, at least we never were that was vocal about my belief in my office.
Right.
And I'm sure my father never even imagined that.
Yeah.
But young people are not. They want to be heard.
Yeah.
So if we suppress that, we are not doing justice.
Mm.
Well, I think we have a red line, and that's a different from company. So I think 2 topics I wanted to kind of mention, because you said it. Make sure you don't strangle them. Let them have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, create an environment as a leader, no matter who you believe, that doing good is, and this is what I said, empathy is not a blue state value or a red state value. It's an American value. Keep talking about that with your staff. You will have a better company. You'll make more money, and you have a more inclusive team for a long-term profit.
I agree. And I think, perhaps that phrase, unity does not require uniformity would be a nice slide if you are sort of talking to your team and just having that up there, because I think that's that instinct to kind of lean towards our quote unquote tribe is normal and human. And I think as leaders, you need to find a way to both recognize that and even appreciate that, and then go, okay, but we're a team of 100, 1,000, 10,000, and all voices get to speak here. Yeah, I think that's critical. I know we're getting close to time here. I did want to give you a chance just to note on the idea of engaged citizenship. I'm really intrigued. How does that notion show up in the workplace?
Right. So I think, I mean, I created in the sense that I'm sure there are many others. I'm not saying mine is, next best thing after apple pie. But I wanted to make it easy for people to take home without getting, overwhelmed with all this thing, because we all natural instinct. And I mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to be an engaged citizenship. You are constantly overwhelmed and you
Yes.
basically don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
So I think I would give the premise of before I say what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, let's bring up an idea that's easy for us to think about. And even if you do one or two of them, whether at work or outside of work, and I call it GEMSS.
Okay.
So G stands for getting involved. And at work, you can get involved in the way you want to sometimes our work have committees,
Mm-hmm.
we have a philanthropic committee, we have, a team building committee, get
Mm-hmm.
involved.
Yeah.
I think that's what I encourage. And of course, at a personal level is very different
Mm-hmm.
in terms of volunteer. Corporate do have volunteer programs. So I think
Sure.
that's another one. So getting involved. E stands for empower others. I'm a product of mentorship. So I'm a big believer of empowering other people
Mm-hmm.
and mentor other people. M stands for microphilanthropy, which I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I go to a gas station in my neighborhood and I put 50 cents to St. Jude, I am a microphilanthropist.
Got it. Yeah.
I am a big into micro. I'm not changing the world, but I'm changing something.
Yeah.
And the last two is first, there's two S in the gems. The first is showing up.
Mm-hmm.
An example I give, pretty much my neighbors are very diverse. I have white, black, Iranian, Russian husband, Ukraine wife, but they have my mobile number. And I have no idea who they vote for, neither do I care.
Yeah.
But they know that they can call me if they need me. So that's what I mean by showing up for your neighbor. That's what America is all about.
Yeah.
And the last S is about starting small. Don't worry about big things.
Mm-hmm.
Start small.
I really like that. And there's something interesting there. First of all, I love some of the story. I mean, the Russian husband and the Ukrainian wife that already is like, wow. You talked about control earlier. And so the idea of simply showing up and starting small, the micro thing, like there's a lot of, you're taking the overwhelm and you're shrinking it down
That's
into
what I'm trying to do.
I actually do handle. Yeah. And what's also interesting about the GEMS framework is like, as you described it, I'm like, it's not a bad framework for the workplace. Like all of those things that you described are valuable just in terms of how you would show up as a leader. Right. And so there's something interesting that there's a very foundational kind of set of principles that you're bringing into place there. So I really love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I know I've kind of given you a number of questions to answer. I'd love to give you a chance to ask our audience a question.
Yeah, I'm delighted to, because as I said, it's also about listening, So the question I think I will ask your audience is similar to what I asked the audience in Alabama.
Okay.
I will just rephrase it a little bit more in a different way here from a work concept. That in the current environment that we are in, AI, and you started the conversation, there are a lot of moving parts now. There is a lot of unknown, unknown. I think I will leave it with one question, that is one thing in the current work environment that is worrying them, not just for themselves, but for the next generation.
That's a big one. Yeah, I like that. I'm curious what people might think about that, because
one thing that is worrying them about the current work environment, not necessarily only for us.
Yeah,
but for the
I
next
love what
generation.
that opens up when you put it forward like that. Okay. If you could wave a magic wand and make the world of work fully desuckified, what does that world look like?
I'll come back to the basic, because these are all, I think that's the only way I think my mind works, in a simple way. I don't like big words and I get overwhelmed. I think purpose helps me a lot.
Yeah.
I think if I can stay true to my purpose, not necessarily every day I will achieve that. I think that bringing alignment with purpose and empathy, I think will really helps a lot.
Yeah. I love that. So one thing I like to do on the show, it's a little silly, so I'll invite you to do it as well. But
Yeah, you told me. Yeah,
if you've heard my show, you'll hear
I
cat
know. I
sounds.
actually haven't. This is one thing I'm not very good at.
That's okay. A lot of us aren't. I don't even know that I would consider myself good at it, but I have fun with it. So there's lots of sound effects on my show, and
I was, when I saw that, I was thinking I couldn't find it. There was a Target gadget. It says, "That's easy."
Mm,
So I thought that was my sound effect, but I couldn't really find it before the show. So I thought, well, I will just mention to you. That's kind of it's not that complicated. I think we make things too complicated.
yeah, I
That's
kind
the
of
reason
like
I
that.
want to find that. I think we just try to make things too complicated than it is. So
Yeah.
I'm all about simplification. So that's the nice. I would play. That's easy.
I love that. I think you're very right. We tend to overcomplicate. I ask anybody who spent even a minute in corporate America, and they will be nodding their heads enthusiastically
Make
at
things
that
too
notion.
complicated, TJ. I think this is my goal now. Make things simple.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Neil. I want to give people a chance to just, track down your book, learn more about all the good work you're doing, the speaking, all of it. So where can people find you online?
It's an easy one. My name, so it's neilghosh.org.
Okay. Are you on any social media platforms?
I am on Facebook, LinkedIn, mainly those two. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll point people in those directions, as well as maybe even point them to a couple of the articles that you mentioned that spoke to some of
Absolutely.
these
I think
key
the Fast
themes.
Company one, I will say, and both the CEO world are relevant to the audience you're talking to. So
Awesome. Well, Neil, thank you so much for coming on.
it's a
And
pleasure.
you're to the point earlier of us being both a part of the Pro-Human Foundation. I feel like what you're describing in your work is a very pro-human way of showing up in life and at work. So thank you for bringing that to the show. Awesome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Neil for bringing inspiration and wisdom to the show. You can follow Neil on LinkedIn and check out his site at neilghosh.org to learn more about his work and his book. You can also check out links to recent Fast Company and CEO World articles in the show notes. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to find some calm in the chaos of work, I invite you to schedule the free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone!